of you, gentlemen and the lady. At the outset, I think I should begin with paying my homage to the memory of Vishwanathan. When I served as Governor of Tamil Nadu, he became one of my very good friends. And we used to often meet and exchange notes on the state of the nation and the state of Tamil Nadu. The last time I had met him was about 10 months ago when I happened to be in Chennai. We sat over a cup of tea and exchanged notes for more than an hour. Now, what struck me about Vishwanathan was that he had great passion about what he was doing. And he kept up that passion. I mean, he never relented on his passion, on his devotion to his work, and what he considered to be a sort of public service to the country. Industrial Economist was one of the magazines which I read with considerable attention and care, because it's highly informative in many senses, in more sense than one. It has data, it has analysis, it has interpretation, and what have you. And I always read the Industrial Economist with considerable interest. And every time I read an issue, the passion with which it was brought out by Vishwanathan came out very vividly and very strongly. And I miss him as a friend. And a testimony to his great passion and his devotion to what he was doing is the fact that he almost died in harness. Having said that, I would like to come to the topic under discussion this morning. I think India is, as everybody says, is poised to grow from here at a much faster rate than it had done ever before, and become probably the third largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity in the next few years. I broadly agree with the assessment of most economists and most policymakers in this regard, in the sense that what they call the three balance sheets, the triple balance sheets, all the three balance sheets are in reasonably good shape. Our fiscal deficit is under control, and the government's balance sheet is good. The corporate balance sheets are all very good. And a lot of cleaning of the economic mess that had happened in the past had been done in the last 6-7 years. And therefore, I think basically India is in a good position to leap forward to a much higher rate of growth and a much larger economy. Having said this, I would like to go briefly into what happened in the last, say, 20-21 years. When the National Democratic Alliance, the present alliance, first came to office in 1998, for the first couple of years, it was working in the shadow of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. So it was more inward-looking than outward-looking in its economic and other policies. But things changed after it came back to power in 1999. From 2000 to 2004, under the watch of Prime Minister Vajpayee and with Arun Jaitley at the helm of the finance ministry, a lot of reforms have been brought about, with the result that from 2003-2004, the economic growth of the country picked up from the usual 4-5%, and it was put on an upward trajectory. So a lot of momentum was built, with the result that by the time the NDA quit office in the middle of 2004, the economy was growing almost at more than 5%. The UPA came to office, and the momentum kept up for the next 4-5 years, and it rose, and the economic growth rate rose almost to 9% by the time of 2009. I think in the 5 years from 2004 to 2009. But the UPA one in those 5 years was embroiled in a lot of scams for whatever reason. I don't want to go into the details. And the only two major policy reforms that the UPA brought was one on the economic front, that is the NREGA, that is, helping the people at the bottom of the nation with the employment guarantee scheme. And the other major reform was political, and of course it was strategic. That is the nuclear agreement that we signed, and got out of nuclear untouchability and to join the nuclear club. But as a result of all these scandals, UPA 2 almost became non-functional or dysfunctional. With the result, the economy, which was growing at the rate of 8-9%, started sliding downwards. And by the time UPA 2 left, I think the economy was growing at about 5 or 4.5%. Then the NDA 2 came back in 2014. And I must say, from 16 till now, the NDA 2 brought out so many reforms at such a rapid speed that, and most of these reforms were, I must say, disruptive in their nature. They disrupted the existing state of affairs to usher in a new state of affairs in the economy. Starting with demonetization, which of course is very controversial, notwithstanding some benefits that they accrued out of it. Then we had the GST, then we had the cleanup of all the banking system and the balance sheets. Then we had, following that, we had the bankruptcy code and the settlement of all non-performing assets through a tribunal, etc., etc. GST was also highly disruptive. Demonetization, in fact, dislocated the economy for a couple of years. Then as we were picking up the threads and coming back to normal, we were struck by the pandemic. The pandemic lasted almost 2 years, and we have crossed now 22, we are in 23. But even so, the economy is chugging along at a growth rate of 6%, which is pretty commendable. I'm not, while narrating all these things, it is not my intention to criticize any government, but to state facts as they emerged and as I have understood these facts in the last 10-15 years. Now, as I said, we are poised to grow much further, and with the 3 balance sheets being in good shape, I suppose that we will be able to attain our objectives in the next 4 or 5 years. And by 2030, probably will be the 3rd most influential and the biggest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. That said, there are certain issues which are worrying. certain factors, certain features of our economy, which are greatly worrying. Now, I would, some of these things I would like to sort of raise here and flag them for the benefit of those attending the seminar and for my own benefit, so that I can hear from others whether they would agree with these concerns or how we would rather tackle most of these concerns. While India has carried out a lot of economic reforms from 1991 onwards, there are some more basic reforms which we have not carried out, which we have left from government to the next government. And some of these reforms are so fundamental to our prosperity and growth in the future that at some point of time, I think the government of the country will have to grapple with these concerns and find solutions. Now, 2-3 of these concerns I would flag. Now, the first concern is, the more fundamental concern is that India, in spite of all these economic reforms, and in spite of the fact that we are doing fairly well, in fact, relatively today we are faring the best in the world compared to all other economies. But India, all said and done, is a low productivity economy, if I may put it that way. India is a low productivity economy with a very high degree of corruption. Very high, the corruption is not merely high in intensity, but it is also rampant. Rampant, particularly in terms of, playing a spoil sport with the reforms, if I may put it that way. In my view, I mean, I'm not an economist, but as a result of my experience in governance, in public policy and all, I'm of the firm view that there is a very strong correlation between inflation and corruption on the one side, and linked with corruption is the low productivity. These are all interrelated. If you have low productivity and high corruption, you will have also high inflation rate. I would like to explain this a bit. Now, what happens is, if you have a low productivity economy, if you spend 100 rupees, you produce goods of an intrinsic value of 60 rupees. The 40 rupees leak away in terms of poor productivity, corruption, etc. So essentially, you're buying goods worth 60 rupees for 100 rupees, and that is what makes inflation high. Therefore, it is very essential for us to tackle both these issues of low productivity and high corruption in the nation today, in governance and politically there is high corruption. Administratively, there is high corruption, and corruption is everywhere. And I think we have to grapple with corruption. Otherwise, the inflation rate would continue to be high, and I don't think our growth rate of 7, 8, 9 will really produce the kind of results in terms of economic well-being and in terms of happiness in the country. Then another reform that occurs to me, which is very basic and which we have not attempted, is the reform in our legal system. Legal system embraces both judiciary and the police. So we need a root and branch approach to police reforms and to reforms of our criminal justice and civil justice. Of course, the higher judiciary keeps on complaining against the government, saying that huge pendency in courts is on account of loss of the inadequate number of courts and the inadequate number of judges at all levels and what have you. That is not really the elephant in the room, if I may call it so. The elephant in the room is our archaic procedural law, both civil law and criminal law. Unless we radically amend our civil and criminal procedural laws and even our Evidence Act, it is unlikely that increase in the number of courts, increase in the number of judges, and all that will really clean up the mess that we have in our judicial system with huge pendency. In fact, I have personal experience of our judicial system. We retired IPS officers were fighting a pension case in the Delhi High Court and in the Central Administrative Tribunal. Our petition was filed almost 6 years ago. It has not come up for hearing till recently. And recently it came up for hearing. The Delhi High Court heard it for 10 minutes and said that we have no time, the court time is up, and therefore we will adjourn the case for the next hearing. And the next hearing is in July. Now we are in January. So the case has been adjourned for 6 months. Now when hearing of the case has started and arguments are being heard, it is only just and proper that you adjourn it for the next 3 days or 4 days or 1 week and pick up the hearings from therefrom and complete the hearings in the next 15 or 20 days. And most of us pensioners, we have filed this petition, one by one is dropping out. Since the petition has filed, about 20 of our members of our association have passed it. Now at this rate, I'm not sure whether the case will ever come up before all of us pass it. We'll come to a conclusion till most of us pass it in the association. There are other experiences also. So there is a great need for amending, for a radical reform in our criminal justice and civil justice system. Even civil cases, they take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to come for hearing. I have a personal case where I've got a judgment in my favor, but the judgment has not been given to me for the last 8 years. Can you beat it? A copy of the judgment has not been handed over to me for the last 8 years. The judgment was passed in 2014, and we have yet to get a copy of the judgment. Now, this is what is happening on the justice side. And similarly, the police also, we need a lot of police reform, root and branch police reform. Now, unless we get all this, mere economic reform and good economic policies will not be enough to sort of take this nation really to the front rank of the world community. This is my view. And
Mr. Rao, can we come back on this a little while later?
We'll come back to that. And then one other point I would like to mention, it is a very serious concern.
Yes, sir.
I'll do it in the next 2 minutes and then close.
Fair enough.
And this relates to federalism of India. Now, we know we have a federal constitution with a strong unitary bias. Thanks to Sardar Patel, we have a federal constitution with a strong unitary bias. And as long as the Congress was at the helm in the first 20, 25 years, it was a monolithic governance in the sense that both the center and practically the overwhelming majority of the states were being ruled by the Congress. And therefore, it was okay if, Congress And if it was okay if the country's governance appeared more centralized than federal. But then things have changed in the last 25, 30 years. And many states are being ruled by parties which are in opposition to the party at the center. And in the last 6, 7 years, there is a tremendous clamor for more and more powers to be devolving to the states and center playing less and lesser role in both in the economic and political governance. Now it's okay. We need to probably look at the concerns of the states. But what is greatly concerning is, I would put it very succinctly, while the governance has improved at Delhi in the last 8, 9 years, the governance in the states is terribly deteriorating. And it is deteriorating day by day. And we have come to a state where probably the states will run up increasingly greater and greater fiscal deficits, and spend whatever money they raise as revenues on subsidies and freebies, and there will be no development. In fact, in a federal polity, real development has to be carried out by the state governments and not by Delhi. And the state of deterioration, the rapid deterioration in states in regard to governance, particularly economic governance, is a matter of extreme concern. And having flagged these 3 or 4 concerns, now I yield to the other speakers on the panel. Thank you very much.